Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining Entrepreneurship to the Point today. Entrepreneurship to the Point. At Entrepreneurship to the Point, we equip, inform, and inspire entrepreneurs. And today we're hearing the voice of entrepreneurs as we talk about procurement and tendering. This session is also live on our YouTube channel, Entrepreneurship to the Point on YouTube. We really are looking at the good, the bad, and the interesting of RFQs, RFPs, RFIs, and the whole tendering process. We have a really powerful panel today for entrepreneurs. One of our entrepreneurs seem to be having technical problems. So for the moment, we have 3 entrepreneurs on our on the session. A really powerful panel. I'm very happy with our gender balance. I always like it if the ladies are letting their voice get heard in this very male-dominated sector. So I'm going to ask each of them just to do a quick intro to tell you who they are and what their business is. Let's start with ladies first. Letty Ngobeni. Welcome, Letty.
Hi, Karim. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Letty Ngobeni. I know Karim doesn't like to write my African name, but I love this name because it means love. So I love everyone. I am the founder and CEO of Integrico Holdings, which consists of Integrico Pty Limited, which is an FM company, facilities management, and Dabazi Trading Enterprise and Project Pty Limited. We specialize in canteens, corporate canteens to be specific. Thank you.
Thanks, Letty. I do love your name. It's just hard for me to pronounce. Next, another lady, another dynamite comes in small packages. Kanye Mluli, or Ladybug as we all know her. Hi, Kanye.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kanye from Ladybug Consulting and also Ladybug Projects. I am the founding member of a construction and renovations business. We do commercial, we do retail, and we do residential projects, and we build dreams.
I love that. Thanks, Kanye. Thanks for joining us. And for the moment, our only male on the show, we have Mr. Teko Maslabi. Welcome, Teko.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. So, yeah, name is Teko Maslabi from a company called Techno Property Services. So we do HVAC, we offer HVAC services, both design and installation in terms of HVAC. So yeah, and we're also involved in the property sector as well, amongst other things. So yeah, so thank you for having me.
Welcome, Teko. They're all very modest. They're all serial entrepreneurs. They have many different hats that they wear. Please welcome and thanks for joining us today. Please use the chat function at the bottom. Tell us who you are, where you're listening from. Also, any questions as we proceed with the session, please type your questions in the chat function. Today, we really want the voice of the entrepreneur and the opinion of the entrepreneur in terms of tendering, procurement, RFQs, RFIs. Our first question is a quick fire question to all the panelists. Short answers. We'll also be running a poll at the same time, so please, the attendees can answer in the poll. Do you participate in public sector tendering? Teko.
Yeah, I do participate in public sector tendering, but however, I've been going less and less that route for the past 4 or so years, mostly been concentrating in the private sector. I think for a lot of reasons that we will unpack later, but yeah, I do. But I think if I had to split it between private and public, I would say public about 30% and 70% of private sector.
Thank you, Kanye.
Yes, very targeted tenders. So it's primarily around the maintenance space. We find that it just helps when you are clear about which pillar that you're focusing on the public sector for. A lot of our work is in the private sector and in particular residential and retail.
Okay, and Letty, you?
Hi, everyone, once more. I used to participate in the private sector only. I only started participating in the public sector this year. So most of our work that we have right now is with the private sector. Thank you.
Leti, I want to ask you, and maybe Kanye, you can also jump in. You touched on it a bit, Kanye. What's your strategy in deciding which public sector tender to apply for? I know as a startup entrepreneur, you just see opportunity and you run around and apply for every single tender that you see. But one soon realizes that you have to focus. Leti, what's your strategy and any tips on being successful in that tendering?
Actually, when we want to tender, we simply look at, firstly, you need to look at what your company provides, because you cannot just go out there and tender for everything that is being advertised. For example, we are on FM space, so we look at the tenders that deals with FM, and FM is more into, you know, those who are with FM will understand that we talk about soft services and hard services. So it's your cleaning, soft services is your cleaning, it's your landscaping and so forth. And when it comes to hard services, you talk about your HVAC, your construction and so forth. So you need to look at the tender and see if indeed it is doing. So if you find that it's a tender for cleaning, for example, and you are doing cleaning, then you can decide that we are going to tender for this tender. Time is gone for where you just tender for each and everything, because if you tender for each and everything, it simply means that you don't really know what your business is all about. It simply means that you have not decided as to what your business is all about. You need to know what your business is all about so that you can tender for tenders that is specific to your business. So that's how we decide whether to go for a tender or not. Thank you.
I think that's important, understanding what your business is about. And Kanye, you touched on it a bit in terms of targeted tendering. Why don't you just explain a little bit more for us?
So we outline a budget at the beginning of the year for business development, and I think it's critical to know what it costs to be able to tender effectively. So it's about finding the opportunities that make sense for that pillar of, you know, that strategy for the business and in its growth, but then focusing the effort in terms of the budget and aligning it. So I mean, for example, before COVID, there would be courier fees, printing, packaging, and sometimes using a quantity surveyor. So all of those things come into play when deciding which ones to focus on. And that's how we primarily wanted to just target the maintenance type work, whether it's interior or external. That's the first thing. The second thing was also making sure that we're not, you know, spraying and hoping and praying that we get something. So it's just investing the time in understanding the kinds of organizations, and, you know, whether they're local, national, provincial, it doesn't matter, that we wanted to work with. And in as much as it is, you know, it's public sector and there are, you know, processes that govern how tendering happens, it's also important to spend time knowing how to tender, when to tender, what to do, what not to do. So I've also spent quite a bit of time with other entrepreneurs trying to understand how they tender and getting some tips and tricks from them. So all the stuff that's being shared is a collective of information over time. That's the second thing. And I think fundamentally, the third thing is just the muscle, the capability. You know, not all tenders are open to the fact that you're a small business and you may need a deposit, etc. for work. So you also need to look at your pockets and your capacity and your muscle, financial muscle, to be able to effectively work if you do get the tender at the end of the day.
And
so those are three things.
That ties in with Leti saying you must understand your business. So for the attendees, we do have the poll running. You're welcome to tell us whether you do participate in public sector tendering. The poll is up on the screen now. Kanye, you just said that you have a budget for tendering. This is the first time I've heard it. I think it's such a great idea. So my next question you've already answered. I'm going to ask the other two. Do you quantify what it costs to submit a tender? Leti.
Actually, we don't quantify that. In our company, we've got actually a tender department. So these people are employed by the company full time. So their sole responsibility is just to scout for tenders and work on those tenders. Because if your business is well established, you've got your printers, you've got your all the stationery required in order to do the tender. So we don't really quantify that. We actually don't have a budget for that, you know. So that's how we work. But like I said, if your company is fully established, then you can be able to have that tender department. Those people who are in your payroll full time, you know, every day when they come to the office, that's what they focus on. And these people, obviously, you need, how can I say it? I can say it this way, that when your company is just starting, you won't have that department. But with us, because our company has been well established, has been running for a long time right now, then we have that department. So we don't have a budget for that, because we don't know how many tenders we're gonna go for. But at the same time, Kanye's right, it's good to have a budget for that. But in our case, we don't have a budget for that, because actually it's not that expensive to do a tender, because you don't buy a tender document. It's previously, yeah, they used to sell tender documents, but these days they don't sell tender documents. You download them for free, so you are able to work on them. You just need ink to print. You just need stationery, file dividers, and so forth. So those are actually ignorable, but not ignorable per se, but those are ignorable costs. Thank you.
Teko, do you know what it costs? Have you done a cost estimate?
No, we don't do a cost estimate per se of what it costs for every tender that we submit or every RFQ that we submit. But however, I think the only time, the other entrepreneurs will also agree with me, the only time, most of the time, that you actually look at that cost is when you don't get the actual work. You start looking at just how much you spend and how much it costs. That's mostly when you look at it. But you know, it does. Even though, just to jump into what Leto was saying, even though you know, it's not really such a big cost to print documents and to submit and so forth and so on. But you know, there's also a lot of cost that goes into tenders that really sometimes can be very costly and annoying. For example, like going to a briefing. If you're tendering a lot, you obviously attend a lot of briefings. So you know, you obviously gotta either you yourself go to the briefing, or you got to send one of your trusted soldiers to go to the briefing, and they leave whatever they're doing. So that then it is on its own. It's a cost. And sometimes if you're trying to cross provinces, if there's opportunities that are right up your alley, and you know, you got to be in Cape Town, for example. I mean, we are based in Joburg. You got to be in Cape Town or Devon and so forth. So that could be quite an expensive exercise in that regard. So yeah, but we don't really look into it, but you know, you sort of like see it when you don't get that tender, you start crying. Yeah.
Can you? I'm curious. Do you have in your mind a rand value, what it costs to submit a tender?
So I'm going to show my background. My background is management consulting, and so and I recall from my management consulting days, we needed to factor in, you know, sometimes you're submitting 3, 4 packs, 5 packs, and then you need to package it appropriately, and then you need to spend the time to make it look nice, and all of that. If you're doing company profile as attached as part of that proposal. So it's not necessarily a rand value; it's more of a percentage per year that we put aside. We're looking at our revenues. So I sit with the accountant at the beginning of the year, and we decide how much money we are going to spend in this space. It's not perfect. It's always moving and agile. Agility is required from us in that regard. But I mean, because we are an SME, all those little things that you wouldn't have to count if you're a larger business, we need to, every rand, every cent, every page, it matters. So I have a percentage that I'm working towards, and the variance is tracked.
True management consultant, thanks Kanye. Our results from the poll is in. 52% of our attendees today say that yes, they participate in public sector tendering, and 48% no, so it's quite a close call. You're welcome for all the attendees to post any questions for the panelists, anything with procurement, tendering, RFQs, RFPs, use the chat function. Entrepreneurship to the point, to stay up to date with news for entrepreneurs and information, sign up for our newsletter at www.eTTP.co.za. www.eTTP.co.za. Trifina, we see you. Thanks for joining. Puleng saying, hi, Kanisa, I agree with you that you need a budget for tendering and breakdown to the operational needs such as printing, marketing, etc. Our next question is something that I've pondered a lot, and it goes to the credibility of the RFQ process. Now, I've been involved with RFQs where I read the specifications and I realize that it's been written for a specific company or a specific respondent, and they're just going through the motions to get the, the required number of respondents so they can appoint the person. What's your feeling about the credibility of RFQ processes? And you're welcome to differentiate between public or private, Teko.
Sure. I think it's one of those topics you can talk the whole day about. A lot of us have been burnt. A lot of us have a lot of issues with that. I think when it comes to closed tenders, if you want to call it that, it is at some point a little bit unfair, because it's not open to everybody. It's always open to guys that have been there through and through, from the beginning. So it's actually, it's really one of those things that are really hard for any entrepreneur, especially in the private sector. That's why a lot of entrepreneurs would start working in business, or rather try to be in business with the private sector, to be embedded with the private sector first. Public sector first, then they jump onto the private sector, because it's so difficult to get in, so it's always, for me, it has always been an issue of building relationships with people. If I had to give you my traits, it's not even a trade secret, but it's something that I do, would be that I attend, people that know will tell you, I attend a lot of property seminars, a lot of webinars like this, where you can meet a lot of people who are decision makers. And then you build a relationship from there. And then, after building relationships, then, they open up to you eventually. Because, the strategy of trying to, I think a lot of entrepreneurs started like how we all did, where you just, the world is just something else. You think it's all green, and you always pick up the phone and just call and send a profile and send a what, and then nobody ever comes back to you. And then, only to find out your profile is sitting on top of a whole huge pile. So you gotta try and get to know people, try to establish those relationships. And then, eventually then they open up to you. Then eventually you get those opportunities to compete. Because I always say to everybody, I personally believe that there's work absolutely everywhere, and South Africa is filled with a lot of opportunities, but the problem is that you're just not sitting at the table. And that's the challenge. I think that's what RFQs or closed tenders do. They just deny you that seat at the table to actually compete with other people. There's so much work that we could do where we are competent, where we qualify, where we even have the financial muscle to do. But if you don't have the that relationship, then it's a problem. And then on the other hand, if you had to look at the public sector, it's all open, it's all good, but there's other issues that really just discourages a lot of people to jump onto that space, because of all the irregularities and corruption and so forth that we can spend the whole day talking about, which also really stops or rather chokes that prospects for entrepreneurs.
So that's the dilemma, I think. It's hard to get into private sector tendering, but then you have a 1 in 10 chance of success if you get onto the list. So I think the key is to get onto the list, whereas in private sector, you're just 1 in 100 or 1,000.
Yeah.
Kanye, maybe just your feeling about the credibility of the process and a bit strategy in private sector getting onto those closed tender lists.
So I'm just going to echo a little bit of what Teko was saying. I am a firm believer in 6 degrees of separation. So we are all 6 network points away from whoever you need to know. So if you spend the time trying to understand what your business growth strategy is and where you best will get the benefit, then you know how to go about it. And this is not theoretical by any means. I'm constantly scrolling through my phone to see who do I know who may know that person, because I'm trying to get into Standard Bank or ABSA or whatever the organization is. So in as much as, you know, we want to believe the world is fair, people do business with people they like. So it's understanding the game and playing hard. So I invest time in trying to understand who is where, and my friends and my networks will know I'm constantly reaching out to them whenever there's anything new. I'm, you know, posting it. Guys, share, please. Referrals are very welcome. If we pivot our direction in a particular way, you know, I reach out to certain people and say, help me out with this. I also was a firm attender of the eTTP sessions. Without fail, networking is a powerful tool to grow the business. And so I believe, you know, if you know all of that, it's prudent to then invest in knowing who's doing what and how you get in even in the smallest way. And I think every entrepreneur I've spoken to will tell you, I started off doing like the most minute thing. I changed light bulbs. I did the smallest plumbing job before I got in and got trusted. So investment in that is important to try and even the playing field for yourself in the private sector, and I think also to some extent in the public sector. Yes, there's the notion that, you know, there's more work that you need to do there. To your point about the ratios, you know, to get that one big tender, you probably would need to have submitted 100. So make sure it's big enough to keep you running until the next one. When you do eventually get it. I do think the public sector is a little bit harder if you're not networked. Yeah, network as much as you possibly can to improve your chances of getting work.
I agree. Leti, what's your feeling about the credibility of a tender process and RFQ process?
Yeah,
We're also running a poll online, so everyone, you're welcome to just tell us if you think a tender process is credible.
you know, when I started, I said ish, because I think I can't give a yes or a no to this question, because it's really difficult to tell, because obviously I'm just a business person. We have never been in the adjudication committee of those tenders, but I would love to believe that sometimes it's credible, sometimes it's not. I know that in the public sector, more especially here in Gauteng, they've got an open tender system where the public or the companies that have tenders are allowed to be there when they open the tenders, and when they the whole process of adjudication, you're allowed to be there. So I want to believe that with open tenders, it simply means that we can say it is credible to such an extent. And with private sector, it's not an open tender system. So the importance of network, as the other panelists have stated, is extremely important. And in terms of the networking that they are talking about, it is not just going in there and mingle, you know, that I was there. You just need to make sure that you speak to the right people. They must know that Leti is there. This is what Leti's company is doing, and so forth. And after the networking session, it should not end there. You need to reach out to the people that you met there, maybe meet for coffee without wanting anything. You simply just call them, let's meet for coffee and so forth, without you bombarding them with, I need business, this is what I do. You just build the relationship from there, then opportunities will come from there. And in terms of accessing the private sector, I think somebody mentioned that you submit tenders and you submit tenders and you submit tenders and nothing comes out of it. I think I think you don't need to be doing it that way. I think You really need to know exactly what tender am I going to, and you should have done the work beforehand. But at the same time, I might have mentioned, actually I have mentioned before in one of the eTTPs that, you know what, you can submit a tender without knowing anyone and you can get that tender. Because I don't want to jump the gun and go to compliance, because I know the question, you know, but compliance is extremely important. If you comply, you stand a better chance of getting that tender. But if you don't comply, you won't get that tender. So the question of credibility, it's a really difficult one to answer. But at the same time, control measures needs to be put in place, you know. And I can say that complete objectivity is not possible. That's my take.
Thanks, Leti. And I think everyone's said it in a different way, how important relationships are. Teko, you alluded to it, and I can tell you, I've been on the procurement side, on the receiving side of receiving 500 company profiles every week. And there's no way that would ever be successful. So the successful people were the ones who sent a profile, picked up the phone and started building that relationship, just introducing me, saying, I'm Leti, I can do cleaning, or I'm Teko, I can do aircons, and just to phone every 3 months and follow up. So just a little tip from my side. We're going to jump in a few into some of the questions now. Any of the panelists? Trifina from Triumphant Zoe is saying, it's really hard, you know, you have to submit so many tenders. Are there some of the public entities that are better than others at responding or giving feedback? I don't know if any of you have a view on that.
So let me try and jump in there. On my own experience, there are a couple of institutions that I believe are way better than others in terms of, you know, just letting you know on how it's going during the adjudication process, and then later on, you know, on whether you've been awarded or not, and even payment, because that is just one of the biggest issues. So I think that's one of the reasons why I started to have a shift towards, or to rather lean more towards the private sector, even though their pricing is more, you know, a little bit cutthroat, but you know you're gonna get paid. So there are some institutions that I've dealt with myself, such as the SAPS, the National Health Laboratories, you know, and there's just a number of them that are really, that I've had good experiences. And there are some, you know, without really trying to burn bridges, there are some like, you know, the Department of Public Works, which still today owes me money. We still, you know, so there are some institutions that are really good, and there's some that are just,
Some are better than others.
that are just better than others. So that was just my experience overall.
I agree. There's another question here from Lebogang Mokoena. Hi everyone, I just wanted to find out if it would be possible to get an explanation on how to get into the government suppliers database. So there's something called the CSD, the Central Supplier Database, and that's open to any business. But to be awarded a tender, you have to actually submit an RFQ. Happy to be corrected by anyone if that's not the case, but that's how I have it.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. And then from Mapule saying, is it possible to get a tender without paying bribes, or the so-called appreciation fee? Mapule, you should never pay bribes or anything. Letty just said sometimes some people even ask you to pay for documentation. You don't have to pay for those documents. Letty, maybe you can just jump in there.
Thanks, Karen. It is possible. Actually, I have never paid a bribe for that matter. And you know, interestingly, I've just got canteens from a big company, 4 of them, and somebody was asking me, who do you know? And I don't know anyone. And mind you, this company invited us because it's a private, it is in the private sector. They invited us to tender. We don't know anyone. We just simply tendered. And yes, we've been awarded 4 canteens from them. So yes, that is possible, extremely possible, because I'm talking from experience. So I don't know whether people are scared from tendering because they think that no, the tender has already been made for a particular company of particular people. But my experience in our company, that has not been the case. All the contract that we have from the private sector to, right now we only have from the private sector, but we have never paid a bribe, you know. So I will encourage everyone, do not pay a bribe, because it will never end. If you pay today, they'll be like, I've got a funeral, some money, I've got this, some money. So I stay clear from such things, but it is possible to get a tender without paying a bribe. And when we get back to networking, you know, it is important to market your company to such an extent that you are well known out there. And when you get a project, do it well, because word of mouth is very important. We just got an invite now to tender for a certain company. And I asked them, how did you know about us? They said word of mouth, where you're doing a project, you know. So make sure that when you get this project, you put your all, you do it perfectly and deliver on time. So, but to get back to that question, yes, it is possible to get a tender without bribing anyone. We are a perfect example for that. Thank you.
I agree. Thanks, Letty. And Demakatso was saying it still boils down to who you know. So the answer is yes and no. People, like Kanye said, people do work or they do business with other people that they like. So it should still be on a fair basis, but it's so important to network and to get to know the people behind the scenes. There's a comment here from Tandiwe about the South African RFP culture compared to other real estate sectors in Africa. I'm not familiar with other African tender markets. I don't know if any of the panelists have a comment there.
No. For what I know, I've only dealt with, tried to rather quote on some SADC countries like your Lesotho's and Botswana. They're exactly like us. In fact, it was a copy and paste type of situation. I'm not really sure about further up. I'm not really sure at all.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I've done private sector tendering. We do a lot of beauty spas, and it's very similar to what happens here. There's a need, and through whatever network point you may have, you then submit, and you get the feedback. So I don't necessarily, I haven't experienced anything different to what we do down here.
It's just some countries, I do believe, lean more heavily on bribes, on bribery. But I think Letty was very clear that you shouldn't get involved in that cycle. And then there's one from Bernadette. When you are awarded tenders, how do you source your manufacturers or suppliers?
So I'll just take a stab at that first. I think you need to build a supplier database. What business are you in? What do you use more often? Where can you get the best pricing? Where can you negotiate and get better, even better pricing? I think it's worth investing in getting accounts where you can, if you have the profile for them, get 30-day accounts, which even helps from a cash flow perspective. And where you've got suppliers who will give you longer lead times, and cash conversion cycle, you make money sooner than you have to pay it out. That's a smart way to go. But in the greater sense, there are a lot of people who will also give you free advice. I get advice from other people on the program. I get other advice from my network point. So trust your network and go build it, invest in it.
Okay, one more question from Zanele. Says, how does one tender in the private sector? Is it by invite? Yes, Zanele. Mostly the private sector work is by RFQ, which is a request for a quote, an RFP, a request for proposal, or RFI, a request for information. But the ones that I worked with have always been closed tenders by invitation. And that's what Teko, Letty, and Kanye was talking about, building your network, getting to know those important decision makers. And often the decision makers or the decision influencers is not the head of procurement. It's the facilities manager at a building. It's the center manager at a shopping center, because they're the people that work on the ground. So get to know your network.
Just to add there, Corinne, sorry.
No,
so we tried to get into a big organization's database, and we were too small. We were told for the longest time. So what I then did is I got a client. It was a tenant installation, which for those of you who don't know, is converting a office space for a client, make it bespoke for a particular client. And so I got a client who's in a particular office park for that organization and did the work. And then I went to the facilities manager, like, come have a look at what we've just done. You happy? You satisfied? Absolutely. Like, please do a recommendation for the procurement process for us. And that's how we try to get around the not being on the supplier database.
You're too small, comment. I have an interesting question, Letty.
Yes.
There's a stigma around tenderpreneurs. Do you think it's valid? People are often very negative when they speak about tenderpreneurs. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, that stigma is actually valid, you know, more especially if all your work comes from the public sector, mainly government. People tend to doubt your capabilities because they feel or they think that government just give tenders even if you do not comply. But when you come from the private sector, I mean, I have experienced that personally. When I go and do my presentation elsewhere and I said, okay, my clients are this and this and this from the private sector, they simply tend to trust me more than when than my counterpart will be like, I've done work for government and so forth and so forth. So people who do work mostly for government are regarded as tenderpreneurs rather than people who are doing work with the private sector. For example, when I present myself, my company, they say, oh, so you're not a tenderpreneur. You get my point? And I'm like, oh, wow, you know. So yeah, there is a stigma and it is very valid. But it's something that I think it's unfair because it doesn't mean that when you do work with the public sector, it means that you're not capable or you have just been given that tender, meanwhile you do not comply. It's not the case, but unfortunately that stigma is there and we still have to deal with it, you know? So yeah, it is very valid.
Teko, what's your opinion on the tenderpreneur debate?
Yeah, look, I agree with Letty, but if I might just weigh in my 2 cents, I think if you just had to look at the actual term tenderpreneur, where it comes from, it's mostly, you know, there was an era during our times, or during some few years back, where we had people that really did not do anything. They were just middlemen who were either connected in some shape or form. So those guys would obviously, then they were termed tenderpreneurs because they were just middlemen. They were just, you know, there were so many people that were just rich, but you didn't know what they did. You know, so there's so many of those guys. So I think that's where the term comes from, tenderpreneur. But, you know, I think, and then along the line, it got misunderstood, and a lot of people that do business with the government then were also just all painted with the same brush and called a tenderpreneur, which is not right, you know, because as I explained earlier, for most Black businesses, your first entry point of doing business, it's the opportunity is more better in the public sector than in the private sector. You know, you got to go prove yourself in the public sector first, then, you know, it's easier to jump onto the private sector. So, you know, so that's mostly that when it comes to tenderpreneurs. But the saddest part about it, if you just allow me to, is that it's often only Black businesses that are, you know, if we had to be truthful, that are painted with that stigma. But a lot of white companies and big ones as well. If you had to go to in the construction space, you look at your Group 5s, you know, I might need work from these guys. Maybe I should be name dropped.
Group 5 doesn't exist anymore, don't worry.
But anyway, yeah, well, Group 5 is not there anymore. But, you know, so if you look at guys like Group 5s and all the other historically big companies that build stadiums, you know, they did a lot of their work in the public sector. You know, those fines, those stadiums were rather funded by the private sector. I mean, sorry, by the public sector. So, you know, but they're not labeled as such. But it's only when, as Letty alluded earlier, when Black businesses do well within the space that they're painted with that brush. But at the same time as well, it's a catch-22 because they're not only painted with a brush because we just woke up and painted them, but some of them are implicated in really just sweeping and scooping all the works that they have nothing to do with. So that's my feel with the tenderpreneurship. But I think it's up to us, the businesses now, to really, and I'll stick to the Black businesses, to really change that narrative and do proper work, do work that we've tendered for, price it right, because I think some of the stigma from the of tenderpreneurship has to do with the cost, or rather the amount of what they are awarded or what the tenders are awarded for or to. You'll find that the project costs 10 million on costs, on real cost, but it's then awarded to somebody who puts in a bid for 20 million. And so then it's not really that fair. So I think it's up to us to change it, do the right thing, do good work, and I think that narrative will slowly change.
Teko, I want to tie in with that. My next question is about unconscious or sometimes conscious bias against small businesses and against Black businesses. Have you experienced it, and how do you overcome it? How do you bridge that bias? How do you change the view, the perception?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I think one that's close to a lot of entrepreneurs' hearts. Yeah, I know, rather sensitive one, because I think everybody, especially particularly, I don't want to sound like a politician today saying Black business, but particularly Black businesses, you go through that a lot. You go through, being viewed before you even enter the room, how you look, whether your English is polished to a certain point, whether people will take you seriously, and that is just the truth of what happens out there. It's still there. Some of it it's deliberate, some of it is not. Some of it is just people just, as Ladybug said earlier on, people just decide, or rather prefer to do business with people that they're familiar with. So it goes to race sometimes, that people just want to, just do business with people that are familiar with. I mean, I remember I at some point I had some small job that I did at ISCO, and we awarded that work quite fairly. But I always irritated the guys because my Afrikaans was so poor. In fact, I didn't understand Afrikaans at all. And when it came to meetings, the guys would just speak Afrikaans, and you could see them getting a little bit irritable. And so it's little things like that people still want to do business with people they're comfortable with, unfortunately. And so it's still, and you're still viewed sometimes as being incompetent a little bit until you prove yourself. So the most important thing is to try and get in. And once you get in, you really got to put your best foot forward and prove people wrong. But I guess in business, these type of things happen. Even if it's not really a black and white thing, you're always going to have people trying to block you, and you always just put your best foot forward and you'll prove them wrong. And like as the Buck said earlier on, once you do that, they'll be able to recommend you to the next guy and the next guy and the next guy, So you just got to go over just that one hurdle, and then it's easier, a little bit easier from there on.
Kanye, you spoke about that a little bit, how you were too small to do a job, or perceived to be too small. Maybe if you want to talk about a little bit more that bias as an SMME or a Black business in the RFQ process on procurement.
Yeah, I mean, you are faced with two realities here. One is we can't run away from the fact that we are a Black business. We're 100% Black female-owned business, and that's part of who we are. It's part of our brand and our identity. So we don't walk away from that. The reality is I am expected to deliver regardless. So I'm a business first, then I'm Black. So I have to focus on making sure that when I am working with whatever client in whatever sector, black, white, it doesn't matter, because the stigma can come, you can get it two ways. You can get it as oh, but you're black, I'm black, give me a better price. Or you can get you're black, so you overpriced, and so forth. So you're constantly dealing with multiple variables at any given time. So it's a lot of hard work, I won't lie, keeping abreast of what's the latest technology, what are people pricing at. I learned a fantastic lesson from Grace and Thabo, who you guys so graciously guided us and supported us with. From a strategy perspective, that I need to track what I'm losing and why I'm losing it. So it's not just because I am black that I'm losing work. There's multiple variables. So I think it's about knowing the process, understanding what's at play. So I alluded to earlier, understanding the game and playing hard. So know the rules, know how to play, keep track of what's going on. So constantly check if your pricing is out. Why is it?
Just losing Kanye there a little bit, maybe a technical difficulty. Leti, I'm going to jump to you. If you can talk to us about the importance of compliance, and you did speak about it earlier, quickly.
Okay. I think when you submit a tender document, you need to really look at the evaluation criteria, because you need to check whether you comply or not. For example, I'm going to use the simple tendering for cleaning. They want you to have the certificate for NCCA, and you know that you don't have it. So you know that you don't comply, So you actually wasting your time submitting that tender because you know you do not comply. So compliance is actually very important, like now during this pandemic of COVID, minimum health standard, minimum hygiene standard needs to be complied to. You understand? So when you are tendering, you need to ensure that whatever they said is required, you have all those things, because even if the company or the client want to empower you as a black business, but if you don't comply, how will they award that tender to you? For example, you need to comply with tax. It's very important for us as businesses to pay our tax. Government rely on taxes. So you cannot run the business without paying tax. As I indicated, government need our taxes. Industry regulation, if they say, like I said, you need to have an NCCA certificate, you need to have that. If they say that you need to have this and this and that, there are a lot of compliance documents that they might require, but the most important thing is the tax clearance certificate, even though these days they are using pins, because now I've realized that companies can actually access whether you are tax compliant or not. But what am I trying to say? If you do not comply, then you will not be able to get that tender. And for example, if you don't get that tender, you have a right to email a company and ask, where did I go wrong? Why didn't I get the tender? They will tell you that either your tax status is not up to date, or you don't have this certificate, or you don't have this, you don't have that, you don't have that, or your pricing is way out. Because the other important thing is that when we do our pricing, we must not think of, I just want to make millions or get rich out of this tender, because you will not get it. You need to benchmark your prices. You need to really, really, really look at prices. Although I have learned that when they look at the tender, they don't start on pricing, they start on compliance. So hence it is very important to comply. There are buildings that have collapsed that we know of, and if that company complied with all the necessary requirements, that building that has collapsed and killed people would not have collapsed. So they look at compliance first. If you comply, then they go to pricing. If you're pricing a way out, it can throw your tender out. So compliance, you cannot get a tender if you don't comply. We talk about networking and creating relationships. Yes, we network, but we must ensure that we comply, because even if I have created a relationship with you, Karen, and you invite me to tender, and I tender, and other people who you don't know at all have tendered, but if they comply, I will not get that tender. Those who comply will get the tender. So compliance is extremely important. But as a lesson to everyone, if you don't get that tender, write to the company and ask, where did I go wrong? So that you don't keep on making the same mistakes throughout. Thank you.
That's such good advice. Thanks, Leti. Compliance is not glamorous. It's a grudge purchase often for small businesses, but please take note what Leti's saying. Compliance is so important. You cannot win any tender if you're not compliant. Not public sector, not private sector. So start with that as a base. That's a non-negotiable. We've had 90 attendees on today. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys, Teko, Kanye, and Leti, the guys have been really inspired by what you've said. Many of them have asked to connect with you privately. So if you want to, you can post your email address or website where they can get hold of you in the chat. So I'll just give some time for Leti and Teko and Kanye from Ladybug to let everyone know where they can get hold of them if they want to continue the conversation. So I've heard from the entrepreneurs, I've heard that you need to understand your business, understand the cost of tendering, understand your capacity, know the rules, know how to play, build relationships, be seen, have a strategy, and comply. I'm going to ask in closing from each of our panelists, just last words. What should entrepreneurs in terms of tendering, what should they do, what should they not do, and any advice just shortly in closing? Teko, you can go first.
Oh, okay. I think for me, I'll just hop on what Lady has just alluded on. You know, get procurement ready. Whatever you do, first thing, get procurement ready, find out what's required in the type of business or industry that you're in. Try to get as compliant as you possibly could. And then from there on, once you're compliant, then start to try and form relationships, see who you can, see where the low-hanging fruits are at. Start with those first, concentrate on those. Once you're a little bit established, you know, then you can go for the big guys. But, you know your business as well. I had somebody earlier on asking about just what, you know, where do you get supplies and so forth, you know. So, I mean, you're supposed to have all that stuff figured out before, you know, before you can tender, before you can go look for opportunities, before any of that stuff. So have all of that stuff figure out what type of services you want to supply or services you wanna rent out there. Is there opportunities? Look at that, and yeah. So and then get compliant. Once you're compliant, it makes it a little bit easier to get appointed or to even take the conversation from 1 to 2. So yeah, so get compliant.
Thank you, Teko. Did you tell people where they can connect with you?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Please do that.
So you can connect with me on my email address is teko@techmoprop.com. That's where you can connect with me. I also have a room rental business website, that platform where people can rent rooms and so forth. So you can also get me there on info@roomstartershere.za. And then I also hold a YouTube channel where we talk about a lot of things property. So on Property Love, so you can also get a hold of me on info@propertylove.co.za. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Teko. Closing words, Leti.
I think as entrepreneurs, we must be prepared to mentor other people. But at the same time, I think that people must be able to reach out and network and ask questions, because I believe that we are available and other people are available to mentor people as we have been mentored by other people. And I think that people should know their business. You can't say that I do everything. That time for I do everything it's long gone. You need to know exactly what your business is all about, so that when you tender for tenders that are related to what your business is offering. And make sure that when it comes to compliance, for example, I spoke about NCCA. You need to have all these things ready before you tender. Don't wait for the tender, then it's then that you can apply for some certificates and so forth and so forth. Get everything ready, because if you are in cleaning, for example, you need to know that you should belong to a certain industry body. So find out your industry body and make sure that you register there, and make sure that you attend programs where they will be teaching you or giving you information related to your kind of business. And when you get a job, when you get awarded that job, please don't do shortcut, because that will destroy you. It will destroy your business. You know, it will really, really destroy your business, because some businesses, you find that you get a project and they just want to do shortcut. And on the other hand, they don't want to give after-sale service. After-sale service is extremely important in your business, because your client should be able to trust you that should anything go wrong, you will come and fix, you know. And on the other hand, Kanye spoke about, she was told that her business is too small. And that brings me to tell everyone that, you know what, it is very important to partner with other businesses. Like, for example, I know that there are certain resources that I don't have, but I know a company that is bigger than me that have got those resources. Therefore, I will approach that company so that I partner with them to be able to deliver a certain project. So I cannot stress enough the importance of partnerships. I know that a person can look at it and say, I am 100% shareholder of Integrico. Therefore, if I get the project, 100% of that project is my money. But if you partner with another company, you might get 10% of 100 million, which will be a lot of money, than when you don't partner and you don't qualify, and then you get 0% of 100% shareholding. So partnerships is extremely important. Don't run away from partnerships. Thank you.
Thanks, Leti. Kanye, just your closing comment.
Sure. So I'm going to frame it as you put it to us, Karine. So 3 buckets of things you should do. 1, start. So what should you start doing? Start focusing. Know what it is you're trying to achieve. Know where you're going to target. Know who you need to be talking to be able to achieve that. Have a budget for it. I think it's important to know what you're spending your money on, so you know the return on it and where to stop, where it's not working. And 3, manage the process. Know which sectors, which businesses, how are you going to get to them, and track it. Yeah, what you don't measure, you know, you won't track and you won't see the impact thereof. Secondly, stop spraying and praying. know what you're trying to do, and then do it well. 3, continue to do, I think, you know, initiatives like eTTP, networking, as I can't emphasize enough. Leti spoke about mentorship, where you can find people in the same networks. I mean, I belong to a women's network that we have daily messages, tender opportunities, business sessions, connecting sessions, etc. So as many networks as you can get onto. And if it costs you nothing, even better. And if it costs you money, then, you know, find the budget for it.
Have a budget.
Absolutely, it's integral when you're so small, or actually when you're big. You know, rands and cents make up the, you know, the business as well. So continue doing that. So join webinars, join networking sessions, etc.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. We're so proud of them as Property Point businesses. You can see how powerful these entrepreneurs are. Thank you for sharing your insights. And we're proud of our partnership with you as entrepreneurs. Stay up to date with news for entrepreneurs. Sign up for all the Entrepreneurship to the Point newsletter. at www.eTTP.co.za. We will be hosting a number of, in celebration of Youth Week, on eTTP, we'll be hosting a number of conversations in the next few days. Tomorrow we are chatting to Ofense Pitze. She is the youngest Black African woman to start and conduct an orchestra. She's this amazing, energetic person. We're chatting some of the very young entrepreneurs from Anzisha Prize later in the week. So keep an eye on our platform and join the conversations. Keep on networking. I just want to get that, our holding slide up. Thanks to all the attendees. I think there's from Komotso saying thank you to the team, Tafina saying thank you, Benedette Isaac saying thank you, Temba saying great stuff indeed, Mikateko saying thank you. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We appreciate your time and thank you to the panelists. All the best.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.